Hey, 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 everybody. What's happening? What's hot out here? It's so hot, I shouldn't be wearing this hat, but I haven't shaved my head in a few days, and as you can see, I haven't shaved my face either in a few days. So I'm just going to leave the hat on and suffer. Welcome to Live Wax with Christian McBride. I am very, very excited about tonight's show. No pun intended. Um, I hope you all are staying safe out there. To all my friends down in Florida and Texas and California, I know everybody's getting hit hard right now by the pandemic. So all of you, please stay safe. And to all of my friends right here in the area in New Jersey and New York, we are not out of the woods yet, so don't get too comfortable. Relax. Don't start wilding out just yet. We have to make sure we always stay safe. Welcome to my backyard. I didn't want to be in the house. How come I don't want to be in the house if it's so hot out here? I don't know. I need some green. I need some green today. But yeah, my guest tonight, my big brother, everybody's big brother. What can I say about Branford Marsalis? Branford Marsalis, that whole generation of Wynton, Branford, Terrence Blanchard, Donald Harrison, Wallace Roney, Greg Osby, Steve Coleman, Jerry Allen, Mulgrew Miller, James Wideman, Shawnette Moffett, Lonnie Plaxico, Kenny Kirkland, Lonnie Plaxico, Shawnette Moffett, Jeff Tane Watt, Cindy Blackman, Lewis Nash, Carl Allen, Terry Lynn Carrington. That's my big brother and big sister generation. And, you know, we in jazz, it's so important to know about the history. And when you ask so many musicians who are their favorites, you know, we always teach them to pay attention to the history. Pay attention to Lester Young. Pay attention to Roy Eldridge, Duke Ellington. Check all that stuff out. But I would have to say that my big brother and big sister generation have been as important to me as any icon from an earlier era. And the fact that I got to be around all of them and learn from them and play with them has meant quite a bit to me. And Branford Marsalis is right at the top of that list. There's so much that this man has done in his career. It's I'm gonna tell you right now, it's going to be impossible to get to all of this in just 45 minutes, but we'll do the best we can. He is a great world-class, and I don't say that lightly, he's a great world-class saxophonist, obviously, just a musician of the highest level. He's dabbled in every style of music you can imagine. He's a great educator, TV personality, an erudite scholar. You know, he's quite a provocative thinker, and that's understandable because he's such an uber smart guy. I bet it's hard to to particularly be around this senselessness that goes on in the country these days. So without further ado, I'm going to see, yeah, there he is. He just joined in. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome to you, I present to you my big brother, the great Branford Marsalis. Drum roll, please. There he is.
Drum roll.
I miss you, man. What's up?
Good to see you, brother.
How's everything down there in North Carolina?
It's hot.
I hear you, man.
I think I'm back in Louisiana now.
Well, I'm very, very glad to see you, man. You know, first of all, this pandemic has affected so many people, and we've lost a lot of people over the last few months, one of them being your dear father, Ellis. And on behalf of everybody, man, we our hearts go out to you, man.
Appreciate it,
And
brother.
yeah, I want to ask you. I want to start right at the beginning. Um, you grew up in Louisiana in New Orleans, and can you tell us about one of your earliest memories of knowing that your father was this great musician?
Oh, I don't think we ever thought that.
Really? You mean when you were kids?
Yeah, there was no point in comparison.
Right.
No, I mean, I still have memories of me like being 6 or 7 years old, and Winton and I shared a room together.
Yeah.
And in New Orleans, we have these shotgun houses, they call them. They're really long houses.
Right.
The rooms are on one floor, whereas in traditional houses, they're in a square and everything goes up.
Right.
Louisiana, it's wide and long.
It was
So
straight back. Yeah.
the house, you can hear it. So we would be in the bed and we could hear Dad practicing. I still remember him. He would always practice Claire de Lune.
Mm.
And then he would do this exercise. I think it's by Hannon or somebody like that. And I heard him do this night after night after night. I didn't know what the hell it was till
Yeah.
10 years later, you know, but it's kind of Dad was Dad played music. We go to
Yeah.
there was a club called Lou and Charlie's, and we go for the burgers. We weren't paying attention to the music, but they had the best burgers in town, so we go for the burgers. People used to be complimentary to him, but you're a kid, you don't get any of that. You know that, man.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's just that's like some people's parents sell insurance, some people's dads are lawyers. My dad was a musician. You know, great musician. I mean, it's a relative term because a friend of mine, true story. I was just texting with a friend of mine named Randy Russell. We played in Clark Terry's big band together, and he was doing a talk at a Rotary, and he played "America the Beautiful" at the end.
Yeah.
And he says all the people were coming up saying, "Oh man, you sound just like Kenny G, man. You're great." And the thing is that it's like how you listen to music is relative to what you listen to.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So that's all I really meant by it. I wasn't trying to dog out Kenny. It's just all these people, I mean, that's who they listen to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they hear, they say, "Oh man, you sound like my man." So for me, I mean, you know, my dad played jazz. I didn't like jazz as a kid. I mean,
Right.
you know, he
Right.
play Elton John song. I would have been like, "Damn, my dad can play." You know,
Right. 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 Right.
you know, that's his stuff.
So when did it hit you? When did you start to fall in love with jazz?
I think I was like 19. I was 19.
Really?
I was going to the Berklee College of Music and went and just got the gig with Blakey. You can ask me a true story. My dad had maybe 2 Art Blakey records, just one that I remember. He had Moanin'.
Yeah.
And we would look through his record collection because these are like relics.
Right. Right. Right.
And then we would always pick up Moanin' and say, "Man, that sure is one ugly dude." And put the record back into the record case and just keep. So Winton calls me when I'm in Boston. Says, "Hey man, I just got the gig with Art Blakey." I'm like, "Who?" I said, "Art Blakey." I said, "Who's that?" He says, "You know, the drummer." I said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." He says, "Remember the album cover we used to pick up and make fun of how the dude looked?" I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Well, we coming to Boston in like 6 weeks." I'm like, "That's great." So I went around the corner. We had this little record store that I want to say Strawberries, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't that because that's a thing. It was just, and they discount records, and Moanin' was in the record collection. So I spent like $3.99. I bought Moanin', I brought it home, and I put it on. And as my mind proceeded to get blown, I was still thinking about the fact that that record's been in my life for 10 years.
Right. Right.
And I never bothered to listen to it for 10 seconds.
Wow.
And then I went and playing with Blakey, and like the idea of jazz was really like, I was like, this is something.
Yeah.
This is something.
Yeah.
The thing that really got me is Smitty Smith was my roommate, Smitty Smith and Donald Harrison. And one day Smitty Smith puts on Nefertiti, Miles record. And that was like some of the greatest stuff I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
And what is this? I mean, what is, man, it's Miles' band with Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock. I'm like, you mean like Herbie Hancock, the guy that played Headhunters?
Right. right.
It can't be the same guy. He goes, no, that's him. And Wayne Shorter's the guy from Weather Report?
Right.
Man,
wow.
jazz. Okay. You know, and so then that was the thing where I started buying jazz records.
Wow.
So 1980.
And in 1 year, you replaced Bobby Watson in Blakey's band.
2. But
2 years?
I wasn't ready for that. But
I don't know, man. You went down deep, and you really learned language really quickly. Because I mean, you sound absolutely wonderful. I think on those Blakey records.
Well, I learned how to play Wayne stuff on alto, which made it sound. It was kind of like the whole Kenny G thing, like
right.
The way that people tend to listen locally, not globally.
Yes.
And when people started walking up to me saying, "Man, you got some new stuff happening," I'm like, "Nah, man, this ain't new. This is Wayne Shorter."
Right.
And then Wayne Shorter plays tenor, and I went, "Oh snap! I can just learn tenor solos, and everybody would think I'm reinventing the alto. This is ridiculous, but okay, sure." So
right.
It started. And everybody's like, "Man, you got some different stuff on alto," and I'm like, no, it's really same old stuff. It's kind of complicated. But
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, you go.
I'm done with that.
I read an interview you did where you were talking about when you were at Berkeley. You actually, the quote was, when you were at Berkeley, you were looking to become the next Quincy Jones. Were you a music production major or a performance major?
That degree back then.
Okay.
Production back then, but when I got to Berkeley, I mean, there were a lot of guys and gals at Berkeley that weren't jazz players. Berkeley wasn't really a jazz school and probably hadn't been for 20 years. There were a lot of guys that played funk. I mean, Steve Vai was there, writing out the Zappa tune, The Black Page, and he was playing. And Kevin Beck there, and he had a fusion band. It was just like a whole thing. And yeah, I was really into production and the idea of production at that time, and sound reproduction and sound quality.
That's interesting, because one thing I've noticed, one thing that's very obvious about you really do keep, you're focused on sound quality. I remember when we played at the Beacon Theater, when we did Sting's 60th birthday bash.
Right.
And I'd never seen anybody do this before. The sound guy came up to you and he put a clip-on mic on your tenor.
Yeah.
And you completely turned the microphone 180 degrees away from the bell.
Right.
And I know why you did that, but I want you to explain to the audience why you did that.
Well, I mean, optically, visually, the saxophone gives the impression that all the sound comes out of the bell. But if you really, and I'm talking to lay people now, not musicians, but you notice that there are all these covered holes. So for instance, if I'm playing a note up here, the sound's coming out up here before it ever gets to the bell. There's only 3 notes that really come through the bell, the last 3, C, B, and B flat. So when you put the clip into the bell, you just get like garbage sound. And the worst part is that the last 3 notes are probably 2 decibels louder than every other note on the rest of the instrument. Yeah. So then you get to the bottom and the sound just jumps out. So if you take the microphone and move it away from the bell, when you play the low notes, they sound balanced with the rest of the instrument.
Yes.
And you get the quality of the sound that's coming through the tone holes that are all above the bell.
Why is it that seems like something pretty basic that most audio technicians should know?
Well, audio technicians, there's no such thing as jazz engineering.
Right.
They're rock and roll engineering.
Yeah.
nobody's really taking classes on saxophone at all.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, it's all about learning the board, you know, guitars, directs, amps, because
Right.
the action is. That's where the action is. So they don't think why would they know anything about a saxophone? One of the things they do is like they're these, you know, that little company in Mississippi, Shure,
Yes.
that were, you know, super popular for really cost-effective microphones. They have these two microphones. They have the S58, which they say is a vocal mic, and the S57, which is this really thin black mic that people have seen all the time. It has the brightest, nastiest sound in the world for an instrument. And you go to gigs, and every time you go, they either have up an S57,
Right.
or a Sennheiser 421. Neither one, which is great for saxophone.
Yeah.
So I always take it out and say, man, do you have a 58? And then they put the 58 on, and in their minds they're going, but that's a vocal mic. And then they hear it and say, man, that's wow.
Right. Right. Right.
And I was in an R&B band.
Now, how Roderick's been working with you for how long now?
Let me see. 17, 20, 33 years.
Woo! Wow.
1980.
For those of you that don't know, Roderick Ward is, I mean, he's like your right hand, right? He does all of your sound and all kinds of stuff.
Rob does the sound.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rob does the sound. Yes, yes.
Rod is the tour manager. And he joined the group in 87. Rob joined the group in like 90, 91.
Okay. Now, how did you find Rob and both Rod and Rob? Because my question with Roderick was on Kenny Kirkland's one and only debut recording, his one and only recording as a leader. He's credited with playing alto on one tune, but we all know that's you. You're beautiful in doing that stuff, man. Buckshot LaFunk, Roderick Ward on alto.
Or it was a combination.
Went and had E. Dankworth.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who had his alto there, and we were just trash talking. And you know the trash talking. I just said, man, I haven't played alto in 10 years, and I'll pick up your horn and blast you on your own horn. And he pulls, here it is, blankety blank. So Kenny said, hey man, let's do that on that tune. You know, when will the blues leave? And, you know, and so we just played it. So I'm just going to all crazy sounding and go against the grain and do all this stuff, because I've been working on that. So when we did it, I told Kenny, I said, hey, we should put another name on there, because then there are people who are writers and musicians who hate me, but they'll like this. And they're like, cool. We said, man, let's just ride. And we created this whole thing with Tane about Roderick Ward, the mysterious, aloof Bahamian saxophone player who lives on the beach and only shows up every night to play one gig. And we got him on the right day. And we had a writer saying, I'm going to go find this guy. I'm like, yeah, you're so incredible. We had this, Tane just ran with it. Jeff Watts just ran.
Yeah.
Aloof, mysterious Bahamian saxophone player. Just got him on the right day. He never leaves the Bahamas. And one day, and he got him to come to New York. And there it is. I gotta go find this guy. So it was a whole.
I love it. I love it. That's so awesome. And now Rob has been doing sound with you since 1991. How did you find him? How do you find? Because you said there's no such thing as jazz audio engineering.
Yeah.
So how did you find him?
It was luck. Rob Hunter. His nickname is Wacko. Wacko Hunter.
Right.
Was a drummer in a heavy metal band called Raven that never got big popular success, but metalheads know who Raven is. They were one of the, and he was on the road with them for years, and he met a gal in Ithaca, New York, and got off the road and started working at a studio called Pyramid Studios, which was essentially where a large number of metal bands went to do their records. Okay. And a friend of mine named Jim Louie, wanted me to help him produce some tracks with a band that he was working with, and they were at Pyramid. And we were doing back in the old days before digital, 2 analog machines synced together. We were editing tape by hand with razor blades, the whole thing that you used to do. And every time I gave Rob an edit, I noticed that he always got the edit right. And even living in New York, they always get the edit wrong because they can't hear the beat.
Right.
So after about 4 or 5 edits, I'm like, man, you're the only guy I've ever worked with that can hear the beat. He goes, man, I'm a drummer. And and then we just hit it off. And I said, you ever listen to any jazz? He goes, no, not really, but it's intriguing. So when I went home, I sent him 20 CDs. And I said,
listen to this. Right.
Call me with CDs. And we started having conversations about what are the differences between jazz records and metal records sonically, not musically.
Yes.
And I said, great, man, you're going to be recording my next record, so get ready.
Wow.
So, I said,
was that Crazy People music?
It may have been. I don't really, it probably was, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first time with us.
Man, I want to get into some music talk because I don't know if you heard what I said before you joined in, but I was saying that my big brother and big sister generation, which is people like you and Winton and Terrence and Donald and Mulgrew and Kenny, Cindy, Smitty, Nash, Tane, Carl Allen, all of you guys were
call.
Such big inspirations to all of us, like me and Hargrove and Joshua Redman and Jeff Keezer, all of us. Did you know when you were coming onto the scene that you guys were part of this whole, like, was it conscious to sort of have this sort of renaissance period of jazz in the 80s? Like, because we always think that all of you got together like in this hotel ballroom and said, look, we're going to take over the jazz scene and we're going to we're going to establish a new thing.
It was Winton. It was Winton all the way.
Mm.
It was Winton all the way. Because, I mean, I was a funketeer. Winton was listening to jazz in 76, playing Clifford Brown solos. I'm like, that's good for you, man. That's great. I just, and Winton's whole thing was, man, tell me what's better about the guys you're hearing now than the guys that you hear from 25 years ago, which was 25 years ago at that time.
Right.
Do they dress better? Do they sound better? Is the music better? And I hadn't listened to enough of that. I said, I don't know. I hadn't listened to enough of that music. He goes, well, the more you listen, the more you're going to find out, the modern, it's like this, and it's endemic to all civilizations. My brother Ellis doesn't play music at all, but he studied his history at NYU, and his history teacher has a terminology for it. And he says, like, a generation develops some things and it's theirs and they revere it. The second generation reveres it because it's their parents and their grandparents and they revere it. The third generation is like, they still do it, but they don't really revere it. And the fourth generation is like, when the British came to Egypt for the first time and said, what are those things in the sand? They go, we don't know. They just been forever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
Jazz. It's just like, jazz, whatever, Louis Armstrong, who? And went and just, and we got to go back to that stuff to get to anything that's going to be ours. And I wasn't opposed to that idea. There were some people who were completely and utterly opposed to it. But I'm like, wait, I kind of like jazz, so sure, why not? Why not listen to Louis Armstrong? Why not listen to Sidney Bechet? And then the more I listened, man, it opened up doors. But no, it was never, for me, it was never really about like taking over the jazz scene. The jazz scene always reminded me of like Fred Sanford's Junkyard. One day, this will be yours. He's like, oh, great, thanks, Pop.
You're right.
You know what I mean? And I had an opportunity to do a couple of tours with Sting and play on other records, so you get to see this other thing, and then you come back to jazz and it's guys squabbling over crap that doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
People trying to invent music through data instead of dealing with sound, blah, 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 blah. but I don't want to rehash that crap. But
Yeah.
when we got up, we were just digging. We just were vibing on playing.
Yeah.
I knew
Yeah.
Tank Berkeley. I met Kenny Kirkland because a woman named Mary Wormworth lived down the hall from me, and Kenny was dating her sister. Kenny Kirkland was coming to town with Angela Bofield. I said, man, I sure would like to meet Kenny Kirkland. She goes, I know Kenny. I said, yeah, Mary, you know everybody. She goes, no, he's dating my sister. And she found Kenny, and Kenny came by Berkeley, and we hung out, and it was just amazing. And he said, man, you guys ever come to New York? Let's just have a session. And I told all the guys, Victor Bailey, Donald Harrison, Smitty Smith. There were a lot of us. I can't remember everybody that went. I said, look, because we used to go to New York every weekend anyway. It was only $35 on the train.
Wow.
So we go to, and Kenny lived on 33rd Street. And so we would get out at 34th and 8, walk one block down, turn left, and we rang his doorbell. We said, who is it? I said, it's Branford. We met at Berkeley. He goes, oh, yeah, come on up. And we just had a jam session in his house for 2 hours. And he was completely,
Wow.
I didn't find out till years later that he was considered an aloof guy and would never let anybody in his place and never play with anybody. I didn't know. So when Winton thing with Herbie and them, he said, man, I want to start my band. I said, I got a piano player for you and I got a drummer for you. I don't have a bass player. You weren't doing
Y'all know.
I didn't have a bass player. But, we used, Clarence C. from D.C. for a little while. And
Right.
like Ray Drummond for a little while. And, by the Bob Hurst came around, who was really well suited for the music. And Kenny and I were on the road with Sting by then.
Right. Right.
We were just trying to play.
Wow.
We would just play. We would steal stuff from other bands and try to, do it our way.
And most of you cats were signed. Well, a lot of you, Winton, Terrence, and Donald. Many of you guys were signed to Columbia at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a story about George Butler. Any story you can think of about George Butler.
George Butler was a very proper man.
Yeah.
Branford, hello, this is George Butler. Great guy, funny guy, dressed to the nines at all times.
Yes.
You guys Google George Butler Columbia Records, and all you're going to see is a guy in very sharp suits. But my favorite George Butler story was he was working for Blue Note, and then they got him from to move over to Columbia, and they said the first thing he got there, they said, look, you need to go to Miles Davis's house and convince him to do a record. He says, what I did not know at the time was that many people had come over, and every time one would come over, he'd invite them to the house and punch them in the face. They knew that. They didn't tell me that. So I say,
boy.
Miles, George Butler, Columbia Records, really want to talk to you. He says, come on in. I walk in, and he walks over, goes near the stairs, and I see him leaning down to slip something. I look up, and he's slipping on a boxing glove. And he says, Miles, I'm not sure what you're going to do with that boxing glove, but I need to let you know that I'm a 6th-degree black belt in karate. And Miles says, oh, man, I'm just playing, man. That was the greatest story. I'm like, I'm playing. What you want, man? How you doing? So that's my favorite George Butler story.
That is a great story, man. And since we're on this, we're on Instagram Live. You can be as unfiltered as you want to. But we also had a wonderful chat several months ago. We were talking about the great New Orleans drummer James Black, and you were telling me. I know he was out there, right?
Crazy man.
Tell me that story about James Black and Mingus.
Oh, Lord, I don't want to. Oh, well. No, man, I don't want to say that.
Okay, fair enough.
Because then other people would come in and say, it's not true. I was there. I saw it.
Right.
Just say, let's put it, I'll clean it up.
All right.
Mingus is known to bully people around. This is not a surprise. So Danny Richmond couldn't make the gig, so he came to New Orleans, and he just picked up a local guy, and James Black was doing the gig. And my dad, it was like 1976 or 77, I think it's 76. Dad said, James is playing with Mingus' band and y'all going. I'm like, who the hell is Mingus? Okay, yeah, we'll go. And it was at the university, Southern University in New Orleans, right down the street from where Terrence grew up.
Okay.
But all these teenagers, we all sitting on the wall, we all play music. We're not really paying attention. We don't really know Mingus' music. But Mingus kept messing with James. And, you country boys, y'all don't know how we do it in the city. He'd stop the band. What the hell are you doing? You can't play this music, right? I don't even know why I hired you. It went on and on and on. Yeah. So after about 45 minutes of that, which, we don't. I mean, I grew up with shit talking. It wasn't like I was like,
right.
It happens every day in New Orleans.
Right.
Throws the drumstick down on the floor, Tom. Says, let me tell you something, fat boy. He didn't say, no.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know where you from, but you in New Orleans now. If you say one respectful thing to me, I'm going to come over there and kick your ass. Mingus didn't say another thing for the rest.
Hey, I guess sometimes you got to push back harder.
Obvious lesson. Because when I moved to New York, there were always guys that were going to try to intimidate you.
Right.
No. We ain't
Oh, man. I'm so happy to see you and hear your voice, man. Now, I want to ask you, speaking of New York, you left New York. You were living in Rye, correct? Is that the last place you lived in New York?
Close enough.
New Rochelle. Right.
Close enough.
I think, Joey was in Rye, if I'm not mistaken.
Joey was in Rye.
Yeah. And you left New York when? About 2002, something like that?
2002.
Yeah. And you moved to North Carolina, which is where you've been for the last 18 years.
Correct.
Why North Carolina?
This is as far south as my wife was willing to go.
Okay.
New Orleans would have been great. But, my mother-in-law lives just outside of Philly in Lansdale.
Uh-huh.
And she's
So you would consider moving back to New Orleans?
Considering moving to Philly, considering New Orleans, considering D.C., yeah.
Oh, wow.
I read New Orleans grand, but my wife was like, hell no, I'm not going down there. I'm not inheriting their friends. It's too hot. And more importantly, I'll never see my mom. And it's a fair point because from here to my mother-in-law's house, like 7 hours door to door.
Right.
New Orleans, 21. It's not remotely feasible.
Right.
You get them saying, I'm going to see my mom, and she'll leave at 6 and be there by 2.
Right.
New Orleans, I'm going to go and see my mom. I'm going to stop in Atlanta, then I'm going to stop again, then I'm going to stop. It's just,
Right.
There.
And did you start, you also have been at North Carolina Central almost as long, correct?
Since about 2005, yeah.
Okay. What made you want to get into the role of the collegiate ranks? Well,
it was actually the director of jazz studies there, Ira Wiggins, called me.
Yes.
And said, hey man, you should come over at the school. Because a lot of people thought that I heard all kind of stuff, that I was moving to North Carolina so I could play more golf. I'm like, man, we rode 7-8 months a year. It's like,
right.
I'm still gonna be on the road 7-8 months a year. I mean, there's no, Dad,
right.
Golf, weather's warm. You can play in December, but that really wasn't it.
Right.
And the other thing they said, like, because they said that I was gonna take over the program at Duke. I said, well, that's not gonna work either because I'm on the road for 7-8 months a year, and I'm not. But when Wiggins called me, I said, man, that would be great. We could do adjunct. And I said, oh, and, I got to have Joey Calderazzo, who also moved around 2007, something like that. So it'd be great there, too, because he teaches different than me. And I'll do this whole, use your ear kind of, Socratic philosophy thing. And Joey will do the harmony thing, and it'll be a great tag team. And we both did it. And it's been great. It's been great.
That's wonderful.
Students are great.
In the documentary, Before the Music Dies,
never.
I had to, something about,
Yeah, Go ahead.
But what you said in that documentary about your students, some might say it was harsh, some might say it was accurate, some might say it was harshly accurate.
Yeah, it's probably, well, it depends. If you're from New Orleans, it's not harsh at all.
Right.
You know,
Right. Or Philly.
you know, yeah, oh, exactly.
Right.
One of my favorite, I did an interview once and the guy says, man, you talk to your mother with that mouth? I'm like, bro, that is my mother's mouth.
I heard. I heard.
Came off. He went, oh. But anyway, yeah. No, it was just this idea. It's like it's an idea. It's a weird kind of, like, I'm just an old guy, and I've been an old guy most of my young life.
Right.
It's like, I can't, because the question he asked me was, what have you learned from your students? And talking about my teachers, me talking about Alvin Baptiste, or me talking about my dad. And the question would be, well, what did your father learn from you? I'm like, that's the dumbest damn question I ever heard in my life.
Right, right.
I was a moron. I didn't learn he didn't learn anything from me. That's how it kind of works. But we've kind of gone topsy-turvy, where, you know, it went from like the youth is the future to the youth is the present.
Yes.
So then the questions are, well, what have you learned from young people? They're young. I haven't learned anything from them. I mean, the great thing, the great thing, and I include myself in that. The great thing about being young is that you can be absolutely wrong with passion and certainty.
Yeah. Oh, man.
There's something beautiful about that. And I remember me, and I remember the older people chuckling and say, all right, man, we'll talk about this in 20 years. What?
Yes. Right.
20 years later going, yeah, bro, I hear you. It's just the whole thing.
Well, I mean, the natural progression of life is, you know, you get to be in your 40s, you get to be in your 50s, and you look back on your 20s and you go, oh, God.
Yeah, that's it.
You know?
But now it's a thing where, you know, people are asking me about jazz and talking about what 20-year-olds say.
Right, right, right.
Lost. Why should I care?
Yeah, yeah.
You don't know jazz. We're the future. We tell you what jazz is. Yeah, man, okay. Man, okay, sure.
Whatever, right?
But, yep, what the blank ever. I mean, I really don't. I'm too old to give a damn.
I hear you.
But, you know, like this idea, and it was really not about my students per se. It was just about what I saw that was happening, where students show up with a kind of empowered identity. And they're like, you know, they talk to you like, yeah, what's up, man? Yeah, you're gonna do this little lesson thing. Like, no
respect.
And they suck on top of it. That was the thing. And so, you know, I get in the lesson and I'm like, well, y'all know y'all suck, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.
I said,
and they got attitude.
Mama's at home. Mama ain't here. You ain't special no more.
Right. Right.
You're just a half-ass musician.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that disrespect really is the one that kind of gets me. It's like, well, look, we're not friends. I don't know you. You know what I mean? Don't walk up to me talking about, yo, what's up, McBride?
Man, you 19, right? Keep that shit up. See what that gets.
Hey, man, I got just a couple of more questions before we take some questions from our viewers.
Sure.
Tell me about the first time you played the Newport Jazz Festival.
First time I played Newport. I got to remember that. Well, I don't really remember it. I was playing with Winton. I'm sure of that. It was with Winton's.
Yeah.
And it was Newport. So it was like the whole thing was, you know, it's like, tell me about the first time you played with Ron Carter. I mean, I can't remember my name. By the third time I played with Ron Carter said, you know, man, it's really like, we're flattered that you're in R and all of that, but we're paying you to do a job that you are not doing. You are sitting and cut it out.
Right, right. Yeah, that sounds like Ron.
Okay. Still couldn't cut it out. So that first kind of tour, when we playing Newport, it's just like, oh my God, I'm at Newport. TV on PBS. They used to always carry the Newport Jazz Festival on PBS.
You know what? I saw that. I think Ray Drummond was playing in the band with y'all then.
Yeah. And so
So
I
that
was
must have been like what, 83, 84, something like that.
82, 83. I
Oh,
was just
okay.
blown away by the fact that I was on the stage at the Newport Jazz Festival. I think Freddie Hubbard was there, and some of the old dinosaurs were there, and I was just like, I just tried to stay out of the way.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was like, damn.
Do you remember the first time you met George Wein?
Yeah, I'll never forget that. We're playing in Europe. Winton's doing really well. George walks up to me and says, "Hey man, let me talk to you, man. Your brother is asking for money and things. Dizzy Gillespie didn't ask me for that for 20 years. I'm outraged by this. Who does he think he is?"
Uh-oh.
Hey, George, let me show you something, man. And I pulled back the curtain. I said, "See that? That's what they call asses in seats. That's why he's getting the money. It ain't disrespect." And then George says, "Hey, I just thought I'd give it a try. So how you doing, kid?" And we were buds ever since then. It was the funniest thing. It was just like,
That's awesome.
and he's like, "I thought I'd give it a shot. How you doing, kid?" And it was great. And he has so many great stories. And my favorite George Wein story is favorite George Wein story. He's at home. He lives on the Upper West Side at the time.
Yeah.
The doorbell rings. He looks in the peephole, and Duke Ellington is at the door. It's like, oh my God, Duke Ellington is at my door. And he opens the door, and he has this beautiful, like, top-down car, and this really attractive woman sitting in the seat. He says, Duke, what can I do for you?" He says, "Hello, George. You have a back door?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Great." And he walked in the house, walked through the back door, and left. Left the poor woman sitting in the car.
Woo!
Oh,
Now
George.
that's deep. That's something else, man. That's a great story. And speaking of Newport, I also want to thank you on the record. My first year as artistic director, 2017, you came with your quartet. And I was very, very special because, George said, "Look, I want you to bring the people who mean the most to you." And you're one of the people that mean the most to me. So thanks for coming that year, man.
Man, I appreciate it. I mean, you're doing great, man. I'm proud of you. Keep it up.
Thank you, Branford. Thank you, brother.
Great to see. Great to hear too. Oh, congratulations on the new record with Josh and the guys.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
Mohawk? Woo!
Yeah, it's Meltdown's tune.
I'm gonna be on that for a while, bro.
Yeah, he wrote his ass off on that one.
Good one.
We are going to go to the Q&As, and let's see, post-genre media. There you are. He asks, what was it like learning from the great Alvin Baptiste?
I mean, we spent most of our time arguing, so it was great.
Really?
Yeah, always. It's Louisiana thing. We just always arguing. But the thing I loved about his teaching style, he says, "You might want to try this." And I'll try something. And I say, "I don't know." He said, "Well, it might not be for you." Like most teachers are like, "Do this, do that."
Right.
He was like, "This, check this out. You might want to," he switched me to double lip embouchure for a while. And I kept it for a long time. And he said the reason was because, like most woodwind players, I tend to use my top teeth too much and I would bite into the mouthpiece. And he says, if you fold your top lip over, you're not going to bite anymore. So why not? He says, because you're not going to want to bite your top lip.
That's right. Yeah.
So it hurt like hell for the first month or so. But eventually I learned how to play, and none of this was restricted. It was just all loose and open. And the logic of it was brilliant. As I started to, I played it until, the aughts, till the early 2000s. Because when I started taking these classical lessons, I needed to have a certain kind of physical stability on the instrument because it would fly around in your mouth when you're doing some of those fingering combinations. So I had to stop, but I still don't bite. I don't bite down on the mouthpiece.
Yeah, I was going to ask you something, like I said, I have so much I want to ask you, man, and we're going to have to wrap it up in about 10 minutes, but your soprano playing is just It's just so awesome, man. And I remember when we did that gig in St. Louis with Peter Martin and Christine Brewer and the string quartet, and we were talking about the soprano saxophone. You talked about Sidney Bechet, Steve Lacy, and Wayne Shorter.
Yeah.
And what is it about the soprano saxophone that you seem to be able to achieve that so many other players don't seem to have been able to do the same thing?
It's mostly about tone. It's really about tone. You know, I grew up listening to Weather Report, and one of the things that Wayne did that was brilliant is that he didn't play the soprano saxophone as an extension of the tenor.
Right.
He developed
Right.
personality on soprano than he had on tenor.
Yes.
Most guys that play jazz, Coltrane's their guy, and with Train, the soprano was just an extension of what he did on tenor.
Right.
Ran out of the tenor, he grabbed the soprano.
Right.
So
Right.
A lot of guys that play the soprano, that's what it is. It's like they just, okay, we'll change the color, we'll play the soprano, but they don't think of it as its own instrument. They think of it like another saxophone, like they're all the same. And listening to Wayne really gave me the idea that I need to treat the soprano differently than I would treat the tenor. And, you know, eventually listening to Lacy and listening to Bechet's sound is just ridiculously massive.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Phrasing is so expressive. And I think that's just what the big difference is. And I played clarinet for 7 years. So the soprano always sounds more like a clarinet to me than it does. So I don't have that bright sound.
Right. Right.
And a lot of it is just, you play clarinet for 7 years, you get used to that sound in your head. So I just use the instrument to emulate that.
And you keep it in tune too.
Yeah. You can't keep a firm embouchure and play woodwinds in tune. They're naturally out of tune with themselves because of the venting, the shunting process that you need to create octaves and messing with the air, with the overtones, messing with the overtones to create these. So it's little things you learn. You subtly drop your jaw here for this note. You kind of tighten up for the other note, and you do it. Becomes a part of it. I don't have to think about it anymore.
Right. Right. Let's take one more question from here. Let's see. Zach Wolf asks, any memories you can share about the Trio GP album? It's a great album.
Yeah, my brother, Delphio Marsalis, Delphio produced the record. Delphio called me. I was on the road with, that was that young period where we were just gigging 300 days a year and it was flying around. He says, man, have you ever thought about doing a record with Milton Hinton? I said, no, who's Milton Hinton? He said, oh, he's his bass player. Who let the dogs out? Is a bass player with Cab Calloway's band, and he's great. You should make a record. I'm like, all right, cool, hook it up. And Delphio calls me and says, all right, the session is here. We got it scheduled, so I went in. I still hadn't really, because it's not like now. Because, you know, in the 80s, you couldn't just say, hey, Siri, go find Milton Hinton. You know, you had to go and find records, and you couldn't find Milton Hinton records, nor could you find Cab Calloway records.
Exactly right.
You couldn't find them. Yeah. So we did it at that studio in Queens, Astoria.
Yeah.
And I had actually never heard a bass sound like that in my life. He played one note. I just really kind of. So after we did the rehearsal, I said, Milt, I never heard a bass sound like that. He goes, back in my day, Judge, everybody played this way.
They all sound like that. Right.
Because I remember we were talking, I said, what amp you need? He said, I don't need no amp. I ain't using that my whole life, blah, blah, blah. And when I heard that, because do you remember Delbert Felix?
Absolutely.
Delbert Felix was playing bass with me in the quartet at the time. It was that quartet with Kenny Kirkland, Lewis Nash. So we finished the session, and Delbert said, hey, man, how was the session? I said, you will never use an amp on the stage again. What? It's over, man. It's over.
Yeah.
Never going to use one again. And he was pissed for about a week, and then he noticed, man, this does sound better. I said, there you go. It's over.
Yeah.
There hasn't been an amp on a stage of mine since 1987.
Well, you know, you also have to get players who know how to project and get the right kind of sound out of the instrument. The same thing you were saying about the soprano saxophone, I think I've been trying to teach younger bass players that. Like they tend to, they don't see an amplifier, they just see a microphone. So right away the the impulse is to just play hard, just
Right.
pull the strings really, really hard. And it's like, you know, you're overloading the instrument. You're not really getting a good sound out of the instrument. So um, it seems like you've never had a bass player that had that problem, though, because Delbert always got a good sound. Hurst always got a great sound.
Yeah.
Eric Rivas, of course, he's been with you for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And my Gemini brother, May 31st.
Right.
So it seems like you're, you know, back in the day, your production values, all of the things that you were kind of interested in Berkeley, those have stayed with you for your entire career.
Yeah. Well, it's certain. Like Kenny Kirkland was perfect because he played the piano the way my dad played it.
Uh-huh.
Not harmonically, sonically.
Right.
So when I would hear other piano players, I'm like, yeah, that's not. He said, why not? I said, I don't know. It just doesn't have a thing. And when I heard Kenny, I'm like, that's the sound. Because my dad has such a big tone on the instrument, and you grow up with that. That becomes your version of normality.
Right.
And then
Right.
that we're playing now, and they play real fast, and it's versatile, but the sound is so light. And I'm like, I can't even. What am I gonna do with that? You know, it has to have a punch. It has to have that dance beat. You know, it has to have that Pentecostal thing. And Kenny had that. Calderazzo definitely has that thing.
Yes, he does.
And yeah, it's just once I heard Milt Hinton, I'm like, oh, that's what a bass is supposed to sound like. Got it.
Yep. There you go.
It's like that. It's not really up to discussion. It's not like, oh, you know. And if you put musicians in certain physical situations, eventually they figure the things you're talking about. They'll figure it out.
Yes.
Because if they're good musicians, and because this has happened to me, where I'm playing all this thing, and I'm like, wow, nothing I'm playing is working. I guess
Right.
else out. And my teachers wouldn't say anything because their thing is, well, if you can't figure it out, you ain't the guy.
Well, right.
You know, you're supposed to, you take lessons, and the lessons are supposed to teach you self-reliance.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you've been taking lessons 2 or 3 years and you can't figure these things out, then maybe you should start playing tennis or doing something else.
There it is.
So,
Well,
you know,
Branford, I want to thank you so much, man. Like I said, I miss you a lot, and I hope this pandemic ends soon so we get together in person and play.
Love you, brother.
Yeah, love you too, man. And thank all of you who joined us this evening. It was great to have you here. I will see you next week. My guest will be Regina Carter. And
cool.
yeah, and Branford, take care. I know we didn't get a chance to get to. I wanted to get to the Sting thing. I wanted to get to the Tonight Show thing, but we'll just have to have a part 2.
Next time.
That's right.
All right,
y'all. Y'all be
Take care.
cool.
All right.
Peace,
See you.
y'all.